Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today it's book review time and I'm heading back into my collection of titles to read for SPFBO8, and book 3 on my list is D'April's Fools by Michael DeAngelo. So D'April's Fools by Michael DeAngelo is set in the world of Talest, which is a kind of shared universe in which the author has written several other novels. And while this one isn't listed anywhere that I can find as being book 1 of a particular series, certainly from the end of the book it does give me the impression that the author at least intends to continue this story with additional books at some point in the future. So in this book, Frederick D'April is a great warrior who has a soft spot for people who are afflicted by the strain, which is a strange phenomenon which grants people magical powers. Not everyone in Talest shares his viewpoint though, and key among those are members of a mercenary group called the Ebon Hammer, who are tracking down magic users across the land of Blacklane. The Ebon Hammer have started taking more and more people, and they're not restricting themselves anymore to just magic users, but they're also taking people who are giving magic users safe harbour. So when Frederick's wife is captured, he sets out to free her and to bring down the Ebon Hammer. So to this end he enlists the help of a mad wizard, Bixby Aladocious, and together they go out to recruit some new heroes, youngsters who are afflicted by the strain. They have these magical powers, but they haven't yet come into the powers in a way that allows them to fight back, and that would therefore bring them to the attention of the Ebon Hammer. And by training these youngsters up, Frederick hopes that he can keep them out of the clutches of the mercenary group, whilst also freeing those people who have already been captured. Now, in many ways, I see parallels in the story here to Kings of the World by Nicholas Eames. We have a warrior who is putting together a band to fight against some seemingly impossible odds, and in Bixby Aladocious we have an analogue to Arcandius Moog, the wizard from Kings of the World. I would say the humour is not the same here though, which for me is a good thing because it's a bit more natural rather than the kind of Terry Pratchett absurdism that we got in Kings of the World. And because humour isn't one of the focuses of the writing here, it does mean that it's quite nicely balanced. Like in Kings of the World, we also have various magical artefacts. In this case it's predominantly weapons, and also various magical creatures such as manticores. So what's good and what's maybe not so good about D'April's Fools? So first of all, for me, I really like the idea, the general concept here of putting together this group of kind of young heroes who don't know each other. First of all, they've been recruited as strangers, and trying to forge them into a unit that is greater than the sum of its parts. Because of the specifics of the storyline, there is quite a lot of magic here, and most of the members of this group, D'April's Fools, who are going out on this quest to save people from the Ebon Hammer, most of them are magic users, and they all have their different skills, their different abilities, and I like how that gives us some limitations. We know, to a degree at least, what people are capable of and what they're not capable of. So among these young heroes there's a fire wielder, for instance, and there's someone who can manipulate the ground beneath their feet, and they're kind of almost standard magical abilities that people might have, kind of elemental abilities, I guess. There's then another person, for instance, who's able to create bubbles, and while that might sound a bit ridiculous and not very useful, it's quite nice to see the way that that gets integrated into the group dynamic here, and also into the battles that they face. There are also a couple of other bits which kind of highlight the worth of individuals over their skills and strengths, and really go to show that everyone can have a place, and that even the smallest or the weakest can shape the outcome of a battle. The world here is quite well presented, and with previous works already in this particular setting, it does give the author an opportunity because he already knows kind of what everything looks like, he knows the feel of the land, so to speak, and it means that he doesn't have to create a world to write this story. He has something ready-made. He already knows what works and what doesn't, what can exist and what can't exist. So that works really well for this because we're able to just see the story being told in this pre-existing setting. I did find the characters to be likeable enough overall, although I will say for me, I don't think there was really a standout in this book. I don't think any of the characters were well enough developed to really leave a lasting impression on me, and I think that old saying, the show don't tell, would really have made some improvements here. There were various instances where we were told that things were, but we didn't really see it. Some of the relationships between the characters were a little bit too quick, a little bit too convenient. We had great friendships within this group and we had romances, but we didn't really have the foundations for those to be built upon. When this group was being recruited, they all came together a little bit too easily for my liking. There was no real persuasion that was needed. These are people who were kind of reluctant heroes. They didn't really want to get involved, but at the same time they didn't really fight against the invitation. There was one that was pretty much a case of, do you want to join us? Yeah, go on then. And then that person left their home to join them on this dangerous quest. So it was all just a little bit too quick. There needed to be, for me, a little bit more meat on the bones, a little bit more of the persuasion, a little bit more of the knowledge of the stakes that are involved in joining this group and joining in on this quest. Another thing about the characters that I thought was a little bit odd is that you have the Mad Wizard, Bixby Alidocious. He is referred to a couple of times as the Mad Wizard, but for me, there wasn't really anything that told me why he was the Mad Wizard. He just was. The only thing I could think of was he has a secret, which for people who don't know, which is basically everyone because it is a secret, it might look like he's got a bit of a death wish. He has no regard for his own safety. But when I first heard that there was a character called the Mad Wizard, I had all of these pictures in my head and none of those came out on the page. There was nothing that really told me this is a Mad Wizard, except for that being the term that people used for him. Now, also along those lines, I did find a few times there was a bit of a clunkiness in the writing where characters were often referred to by a description where I felt it was unnecessary to do so. So early in the story, for instance, Frederick and Bixby go to a town and they're in a tavern, and instead of referring to them as they or them, you have them referred to as the visitors to whatever the town was called, which I thought was a little bit strange at first, but not anything that was so unusual that it would throw me out of the story. Later on in the story though, I found it was heightened whenever we met the Ebon Hammer, which invariably meant we had a battle. So the warriors, the mercenaries who make up the Ebon Hammer were almost always referred to in battle as the members of the Ebon Hammer, or the Ebon Hammer mercenary, or something along those lines. There was even one battle scene where the assailant was referred to as the woman who fought on behalf of the Ebon Hammer. And the author here could have just said she, the woman, the warrior, the swordswoman, anything along those lines rather than that big long mouthful. Now, in those circumstances, other writers might use nicknames for the characters based on their looks, so they might have hook nose or long hair or something along those lines to distinguish one character from another, and then once you've introduced that term, you can use that essentially as the name for that particular character. And I feel this would have been a really useful tool here because I did a count and there were something like 60 or 70 instances where you had the member of the Ebon Hammer, or the Ebon Hammer member, or the Ebon Hammer mercenary, or any combination of warrior, fighter, champion, along with Ebon Hammer. And it just felt a little bit awkward, a little bit clunky when the times these are being used are battle scenes, and in those scenes I want quick and concise writing to help speed me through this intense scene. It also seemed that every enemy, every member of the Ebon Hammer had a magical weapon or two, and after a while that grew a little bit old. Despite the power of these weapons though, I also never really felt that any of our main characters, any of our heroes or fools, were going to die in battle against them. So it kind of took the edge off those scenes a little bit, and as a result took the edge off the entire book as a whole, because I just didn't think that we had very high stakes here. I felt that things were a little bit too easy and that somehow there was no real danger that our characters were actually in. So overall, I thought it was quite an enjoyable story itself, but one that could do with, for my mind, a few tweaks if it wants to stand out from the crowd. I thought there were some pretty good action scenes, especially towards the end of the book, but we took too long to get there and not enough happened on the way. And because I didn't really have a connection to any of the characters, that meant there was nothing to really drive me through the body of the book to deliver me at the end of it desperately wanting to read more. So this one was definitely a bit of a mixed bag. The writing itself, apart from those couple of little bits of clunky word use that I pointed out, and maybe a bit of telling instead of showing, I felt that overall there was a pretty good job done on that side of things. The story itself was okay, the characters were okay, all of the kind of base ingredients were there pretty much. I think they just needed a little bit more time in the oven and a few more finishing touches to really help elevate this novel. Now, at the time of filming this review, there's not really much of a presence on Goodreads for this book. I think there were only 4 people who had rated and reviewed this book on Goodreads before I had. But if this is one that you're thinking of picking up, let me know in comments down below what you're looking forward to, what you're expecting from this book, or if you have read it, what are your thoughts and feelings on it? I'll leave a Goodreads link to the book down in the description box below if you want to find out a little bit more, or if you want to read some of the other reviews that people have written for this book. Also in the description box you can find, as usual, all of my social media and support the channel links, including my book club Discord and my Patreon. I hope to see you in another video soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.